recently have become kind of obsessed, but healthily so, kind of obsessed with Dust Tactics. I really enjoy this game. I'm purchasing expansions, I'm trying different types of battles, different combinations of units, and I'm really enjoying everything that they get out of the Dust Tactics universe. And after playing these scenarios in the original Dust Tactics set, the scenarios in the revised core, and also some scenarios that I created, I've decided to start exploring the campaign expansions, and I picked up Operation SeeLowe. I don't know how that is pronounced, I don't speak Spanish. In any case, this campaign expansion here tells the story of an Axis attack against a British base, so the Axis units are going to be the attackers. And this is a campaign that emphasizes indoors fighting. In this box you find terrain tiles that allow you to create different types of buildings, which is great. Also because you can use those tiles for other battles that you can create. You have a scenario book, of course, you have plastic cover elements, and you have 2 new heroes. Here you have the allied heroes. This guy here is impervious to damage, to any type of damage for 1 turn, and also the squad he's attached to has that benefit. Very useful, for example, if you're attaching to a squad like the Tank Busters, so they can sneak close to a big enemy tank without taking damage, and then they can deliver a mighty blow. Pretty interesting character. And then here you have Marcus, the big Axis ape, who is the natural leader of the Axis guerrillas, who by themselves are not that interesting of a unit, but when you combine their abilities with Marcus' abilities, then you really have an interesting melee squad. In fact, I would not recommend purchasing the Axis Guerrillas squad until you have this expansion here. Anyways, I played the expansion, and in this video I'm going to tell a little bit about my impressions of the battles and my experience of playing the battles that come in this expansion. This is the first scenario in the book. The players here are fighting for control of this square here. The side that has a unit alive in that square at the end of the 8th turn, which is the last in the game, is the winner. The attacker enters from 3 squares along this edge here, and the defender, the allied defender, will enter from these 2 edges here. Most likely the defender will want to enter from this area here and this area here, because the defender needs to get inside the building to take control of that square before the attacker does, or at least to be there to dislodge the attacker. You can place cover elements in the central area of the board. However, this scenario felt a little claustrophobic. True, you could place cover elements around here and try as the attacker to attack from here or from 2 sides, part of the units entering from here, part of the other units trying to outflank the defenders, but I tried that, it didn't work at all, because the units that were moving in this direction were just destroyed by the defenders that were placed in this area, taking advantage of cover, and simply inflicted so much damage that the Axis survivors really couldn't put on a fight. Then I played the scenario again with all of the attackers simply pouring in from here and all of the defenders entering from here, and it worked better for the attackers, but the scenario felt a little claustrophobic. All of the action pretty much took place in here. True, there were interesting things that happened because of the limited space, of the way in which units were using walls to take cover, and of course they had to maneuver around those walls in order to be able to gain an advantageous position on the opponent, but it just felt a little too puzzle-like for my taste. So it was a good intro to the campaign in that this scenario really emphasizes indoor fighting, but as a scenario not my favorite in the Dust universe so far. This is the map for the second scenario in the book. This is called Bad Jump Part 1. Basically, infantry units of the Axis attackers landed in this area of the Allied base by paratrooping, and well, they just landed not where they wanted to, and so now they happen to be in the middle of the area where there are also enemy units. In this scenario, you can only use squads, no vehicles, no walkers. This scenario just covers part of the engagement that only has to do with infantry. Now, very interesting thing here is that as opposed to many scenarios in which the two sides enter the board from opposite sides of the board, here the beginning is a mess. Everybody is already close to where the opponent is. The attacker, the Axis player, will enter units on the board from squares marked with an A on this map, and the defender, the ally player, will place units on the D squares. So as you can see, that really represents the fact that the allied units were just scattered around, minding their own business, and then Axis units start and, well, dropping from the sky everywhere. And what you see here on the board is a situation at the end of turn 1, after everybody entered the board, and of course, as you can see right after entering the board from those squares that I showed you earlier, the units run for cover. Actually, there were more units here at the beginning of the turn. There are already 2 squads that were eliminated during combat in turn 1. Precisely because everybody's already so close to the opponents that there are more chances here to have combat in turn 1 than you have in other scenarios. Actually, it is very important to keep an eye on the units that the opponent still has to bring in, so that you know the kind of danger that the units that you bring on the board are going to be exposed to in case one of the remaining units of the opponent pops out or, well, drops exactly where in a position where it could attack one of the units that you already committed. Very interesting situation, and I think this is a scenario that will have a lot of replay value, precisely because of the vastly different ways in which you can set up the game in turn 1. And now I'm going to play the scenario and see what happens next. That scenario was mega fun. I really like the fact that the units were scattered all over the board, so there were fights happening all around and different ways in which the units were trying to outmaneuver each other. Really fun. In the scenario book, after that scenario, you have another one that is based on a very similar idea, but that scenario only involves walkers. That is, now it is the Axis walkers that landed in an area of the Allied base, and guess what? They landed in an area where there are only walkers. So again, you had the idea of units just appearing all over on the board, but this time you only have walkers. It is a larger board. It is not the one that you see here. I haven't played that scenario. I wanted to move on and try a scenario that was based on a different idea so that I could show you how different types of scenario work. Here we have scenario 4, which is more traditional in that you have the defender and the attacker entering the board from opposite sides. Different configuration of buildings from the configurations that you saw before. Here, well, this is a slaughter your enemy type of scenario. It lasts up to 8 turns. At the end of the last turn, you count victory points based on the enemy units that you eliminated. However, here you can also gain extra points by having control of specific squares on the board at the end of the last turn. If the attacker has a unit that is alive at the end of the game in that square there, then the defender gains 100 points. That's a lot of points. If the attacker has control of that square and or that square at the end of the game, then these squares are worth 50 points each. So you add those to the other points that you gained by eliminating enemy units at the point you determine who the winner is. Here again, what I'm showing you is the deployment of the units on the board at the end of turn 1. As soon as I'm done filming this, I'm going to play this battle, and I think this is going to be another interesting one. This is a scenario that I have not played, but I will show it to you for information. It is called The Last Stand. The attacker enters from there, and the defender will set up inside this building here. The attacker can bring to the fight as many units and as many army points as he wants. Then the defender will use half the amount of army points that the attacker is using. So the defender definitely starts pretty outnumbered, well, 2-1 in terms of army points, but not by chance. This scenario is called The Last Stand. All that the defender has to do is to survive. If there is still at least one unit of the defenders alive at the end of the 8th turn, the last in the game, then the defender wins. And the attacker, in order to win the game, has to eliminate all of the allied defenders. Again, I haven't played it, but if you like Last Stand type of situations and definitely a lot of indoor fighting, then I think this could be an interesting scenario. This is definitely a large scenario. It uses 12 terrain tiles, and also each side can use up to 350 army points to build their units. So that means that you can really bring a lot of different units to the battle. A lot of experimentation with different combos are possible here. The defender enters the board from this side here, and the attacker from there. The two players are trying to eliminate enemy units and to take control of the buildings on the board. This is a scenario that I managed to play face-to-face, which with my busy schedule is not that easy these days. I play most of my Dust Tactics in solitaire, and I had a great time playing this against an opponent. I'm sure that the game is fun also when you play it against opponents. Strange, huh? It's just that I play most of my games the other way these days. Anyways, this was really fun because there was a lot of interaction, not only between different types of units and the two sides, of course, but between different types of space. It was really interesting to move inside and outside of buildings to exploit the different possibilities that different types of spaces have. I like this as opposed to scenarios where you have empty areas and then you have a big indoor area in one area. Here, moving back and forth inside and out of buildings, and that also means, for example, in and out enemy line of sight, added a lot of interesting challenges. I definitely like this scenario, and I would like to play it again in the future, possibly as soon as I can. Great expansion. Some battles I enjoyed more, some less, but in general these are good battles. And the battles that I enjoyed the most are the ones in which there is an interaction between indoors and outdoors, in which there are several buildings scattered on the board, and the players have to try to take advantage of cover from buildings for as long as possible. Sometimes they have to wait for the right moment to run out of a building and maybe just to then run back into another building as soon as possible. Since there is an alternative to being outside, then of course your strategy will revolve around that, around being able to take as much advantage as possible from the buildings and trying to deny that advantage to your opponents. Some units work better inside the buildings, melee squads are good, and in general ranged weapons that do not take cover into account are particularly effective in indoors situations, because when you're inside a building there's always some cover that is going to be part of the fight, and of course you want to have that advantage of not having the cover penalty when you are attacking the opponent. In any case, the scenarios show great variety. There are definitely different types of fighting, different types of battles that you can play thanks to the scenario book. There is a scenario that I didn't have time to talk about, which you only have command squads and heroes and nobody else. Very different from anything else that I've seen so far. So definitely think that this is a campaign expansion that is great value for your money, because of the scenarios that you can play out of the scenario book, but also simply because of the components that you find in this game, the cover elements and the terrain tiles especially, and also the heroes, all things that can be of great help to enhance your experience of playing Dust Tactics when you combine them with other elements from other sets and when you use them to create your own battles.